Right, so in today's video we're going to be building a workbench that fits up right here against the garage wall. Just a quick disclaimer before we start. If you're an experienced carpenter or a seasoned DIYer, this video probably isn't for you. However, if you are someone who has very limited experience building things from scratch and want a walkthrough that is simple and easy to adapt, then you're in the right place. So, the wood used in this video was from Wix, who I am cautious to recommend, but I'll explain more about why that is later in the video. The size of the longer wood is 45 by 95 and the top is structural plywood, which is 18mm thick. I started off by putting the legs together first, before moving on to putting the frame of the table together. So the way I've done the leg is I've got two pieces of wood that I've screwed together. One piece is 80 centimetres and the second piece is 70.5. And the reason for this is that when I come to make the frame, the weight's going to be on this part of the leg, which is going to be taking most of the downward force. So it means that when the workbench is standing, it's not going to be the actual screws that are taking that sort of lateral force. It's going to be this part of the leg which is taking most of the weight of the actual workbench itself. So we'll do the three legs together and then it'll be on to doing the framework. When putting the frame together, I made sure to put supports in a couple of different places just to support the top once that's screwed down. And at this point, this is where most of you will probably want to tune out. That's right, the table is wobbling. Now, this is not from a lack of measuring. You can't see much in the video as I tried to keep the video quite short, but I measured everything about 4 to 5 times before screwing anything together. I did think it was me to begin with, but as you'll soon find out, it was the wood. You should never blame your tools or materials, but I am in this instance, and you'll see shortly why that is. Cut insert into the top so that it would fit with the breeze block pillars either side of the workbench. I somehow forgot to film this, but you can sort of imagine what it must have looked like. I made sure to add screws along the complete frame, including the supports too. Right, so it's day 2 now of building the workbench, and I've got a bit of a problem. So you may have noticed from the previous clips that this leg and this leg, they're just not working together whatsoever. There's a lot of play in the table. I did notice the problem when I first made the frame, so I'll show a clip on screen now of how wobbly the frame was when I was first putting it together, and I thought originally it was the way I put it together, but the first thing I did was I took one of these pieces. You can see even now it's not fitting flush to the table, and I was thinking this morning it's the table's not flat. However, if I just take this piece of wood now and we walk down the end of it, you can just see how warped this piece of wood actually is. You can see how it twists down towards that side there, and even flip it the other way, you can just see the lack of, you know, straightness in the wood. I mean, look how terrible that is. It's so wonky. Now, thankfully, the table itself is pretty much flat all the way across. I mean, there might be a slight discrepancy in it, but like I said at the start, I'm not a carpenter. I'm not an expert at any of this, but it's going to do the job that I'm after. So what I'm going to do to solve the problem is I'm going to get the spirit level, check everything's level on the top, and I'm going to make a few pieces to fit underneath there and underneath the other side over there to make sure it's absolutely perfectly level. When installing the shelf, I measured 40mm from the bottom of each foot, so that the shelf was slightly raised off the ground. You may want to put this in higher if you want more room to store things below, but for me, the one shelf was plenty for the things that I wanted to put on the workbench. I finished off by cutting the plywood to size, and I cut some inserts into the front and the back as well, just so that it would fit flush with the table legs. However, this didn't go entirely to plan, which you'll see shortly, but it still does the job, which is actually what matters. And there we go, the workbench is complete. Now, like I said earlier in the video, I've put a few bits under each of the legs, so you can see now it is sturdy as anything. It's not going anywhere whatsoever. And I've checked the top too, and it's as flat as it can possibly be. So in the end, it's all worked out quite well. Now, just a couple of extra bits to mention then on the workbench. So what I didn't intend to do originally was to leave these end pieces on. However, I thought it might be quite handy just to leave them in case I wanted to maybe store things underneath, or if I needed to clamp anything to this end of the table, as opposed to the big, thick, chunky part of the table here. So that's why I ended up leaving it on this side, and also on this side too. Eventually, we do want to put a door around here, so what I will have to do is cut this bit down at some point, but that's not a job for today, so it's something that I can do in the future. Also, what else would be nice is to put a bit of trim along the front here, just to tidy things up. Make sure as well with the saw, you can pull it forwards, and it's got plenty of room to move backwards, so it doesn't actually hit the wall. Now, there are a few imperfections in this table. I mentioned about this shelf at the bottom and about it not fitting perfect. Now, if you look at it just from standing back here, it doesn't look too bad, whereas if I come over to the end here, you can see that's not perfect there, but then I've just slotted this thing in because you can see there's a massive gap towards the edge. Now, the reason for this was because when I was cutting the little divots out, I didn't take into consideration that there was a 20mm hangover here, because I thought, oh, it'd be nice for the shelf just to hang over a touch so it doesn't look as flush as what this one does. But when I did the measurements for the back, I didn't take into consideration the fact that I'd need to give an extra 20mm towards the back here, hence the little weird space. But I've slotted that in. It's not hurting anyone, everyone's surviving. It's a win-win. Now, I could have easily hidden these mistakes and pretended that they didn't exist and just show you shots where you can't see them. But I think what is important when you're doing stuff like this is that you're able to learn from your mistakes and you're able to sort of look at it and think, right, what would I do differently next time? So for me, building something like this workbench is a great way just to practice a few things, learn a few skills along the way, and next time make something, it's not going to have the same sort of imperfections. Now, if you have enjoyed today's video or you have found it useful, then feel free to give it a like. And if you'd like to see any of my other videos, then feel free to subscribe. I've got loads of plans for 2023 and lots of ideas of different videos I want to make, such as levelling the lawn in the garden again. I'm going to be scarifying, overseeding, fertilising the lawns, all that sort of stuff. And I've got a few big projects like putting a door in the sides of the garage, building the barbecue station, and doing something about all the brickwork around the outside of the garden, because it is very brick heavy at the moment and I want to just soften that aesthetic by adding something there. So, like I said, if you are interested in watching any of those, feel free to subscribe. And finally, thanks for watching.